Well, it's good to be with you this morning. As Terry pointed out, I started off in Sydney, then went down to Melbourne, then to here. So I am able to say that I've been rained on all over Australia. What a privilege. Yeah, that was breakfast. Chaps, are we okay with the sound? You okay now? Yeah, okay, we'll just talk for a bit and see what happens. There's loads of great curriculum here. I wrote some curriculum too. Fusion, Impact, Detonate. What I was doing was writing on Wednesday to present to 200 boys and girls every Saturday morning, and then Monday I'd revise what I did. So if it worked, it went into the book. If it didn't work, it didn't go into the book. So what you ended up with is 3 years worth of curriculum that actually works. Yes, it's quite rare. Each book contains 52 lessons, object lessons, illustrations, Bible text, Bible stories, games, all in there. 3 volumes of that. After traveling around the world for a little bit, taking various seminars and workshops on children's ministry, I eventually put those workshops and seminars down in a book. That book is called Don't Tell Cute Stories, Change Lives. This is the one lots of you will like because it's got all the stories in it, and you like anecdotes that go with the actual theology. So you'll find that in that book. And finally, over a 5-year period, I did a PhD in child evangelism. Some of the findings of that research is in this book. Because I don't want to oversell this, I'll just simply say to you that this book contains the principles that will change the world. Not overselling that, was I? Now, this is the most depressing part. I'll tell it to you. These are all available from David Goodwin at the Kids Reach stall at the back. There's this lovely card that goes with it, so you can pay with invoice or cash or check, all at the back. This is the interesting part, depressing part. If you buy all 4 of these, he is giving this one away for free. Now, I know that sounds like a great bargain, but when you've spent 5 years writing something, and some Australian chap, who's actually a New Zealand chap, pretending to be an Australian chap, is giving them away for free, it's a little hard to take. So I'm kind of hoping there's a prayer ministry area later, 'cause I need to go. Just one more point before we get into this. Just a bit of advice for Squirt the Clown. Never ever choose anybody with a hand up or any children's workers who say they've been in ministry for 44 years. Because they're worse than people who put their hands up. All right, that's me. I think the sound's working okay. What I want to do for you this morning is I want to talk for a shortish period of time on the subject of stories. And I don't just want to talk about stories because it's the main vehicle that Jesus uses for communicating truth. I want to talk to you about stories because I think stories are truly powerful. In fact, I don't think you or I act based on reality. I think you and I act based on the stories that we believe about reality. Let me prove that to you. If somebody is telling bad things about you, if somebody is gossiping about you, it doesn't matter if it's true or not, you want to do something about it. You don't act based on the reality, you act based on the stories that you believe about reality. Now, for that reason, stories are not only powerful, stories can be dangerous. The Nazis told stories about Jewish people. The Serbs told stories about Croats. White supremacists told stories about black people. And as a result of the stories, millions of people died. Now listen to that. Not because of the reality, but because of the story, millions of people died. Right now, throughout Australia, lots of stories are being told. Stories about gay people are being told. Stories are being told about asylum seekers. Stories are being told about Muslims. Lots and lots of stories about Muslims. And if we buy into the stories, not the reality, if we buy into the stories, then hundreds of thousands of people will be affected and many of them will lose their lives. Stories are truly powerful. Now, you and I, the sociologists tell us, live inside stories. They have clever words for this. They say that you and I live inside something called a framing narrative. I agree. We'll call them stories. And what I want to do for you this morning is highlight for you 6 of the most popular framing narratives. You understand the terminology. They are framing. So we live inside that particular story. So I want to highlight for you 6 of the most popular framing stories. And I want to invite you to ask yourself the question, which one am I living in? Which one have I become a part of? We live inside stories. We rarely live inside the reality. So I'm going to invite you to work out which story you live in. And a warning, for a big chunk of this talk, you'll have absolutely no idea where this is going. Would that be okay? Let's go on this adventure together and see where we go. Okay, so these are the 6 stories. They all have something in common. They all have behind them the idea that we're all searching for peace and security. The first of the stories, the oldest of the stories, is called the domination story. The domination story says, for me to have peace and security, I must be in control. For us to have peace and security, we must be in control. The we can take lots of different shapes. We can be a particular political party. We can be a particular country. If we were in control, then the whole world would have peace and security. We can be a religion. We can be Christians. If the Christians were in charge, everybody would have peace and security. We find the domination story outworking itself in lots of different areas. When I'm back in England, a day a month, I sit in their legal system, and I sit as a judge with 2 other judges, and I sit there once a month, and we oversee various cases, and I sit lots on domestic violence cases. And I listen to the talk through the course of the day. I listen to the defense, listen to the prosecution, and always in the middle of the day, at the very heart of all these words, I'll see this story being outworked. The domination story outworking itself. Somebody in the middle of a family has decided that the only way that they will find peace and security is to control everybody else in the family. To stay in control of their wife or their husband or their children, and they maintain that control, whether it be through physical violence or emotional violence. And they maintain their control. Middle-level managers who work on a domination story are a nightmare to work for. And by some of your faces at that point, I can see some of you work for them. And the problem with middle-level managers who work in a domination story is it's never a case of, let's all be brilliant together. Let's all rise together. If I'm successful and you're successful, this company will be successful. They do not work on that principle. They work on the principle that if you're successful, it reflects badly and negatively on them, so they never want you to look good. So they always keep you in your place. For them to establish peace and security, it involves them keeping you in your place, not allowing you to be everything that you can be. But it becomes much more subtle than this domination story. I was, in my early 20s, I was working at a huge conference in the middle of England called Spring Harvest. Indeed. I think that was somebody cheering. I'm not sure, but it might have been a demon coming out. But I think it was somebody cheering. We can but hope. And there I am in Spring Harvest working. You're going to do that every time I say Spring Harvest. It's like your keyword. Wow, we know how this demon manifests. Let me show you. Spring Harvest. It's gone. Hallelujah. And there I am working in this conference in the middle of England. And I'm working with something called the Glory Company, led by a chap called Ishmael. And I'm a small group leader. And I'm looking after 10 darling, lovely, wonderful 8-year-olds. And one 8-year-old from hell. Now the 10, no problem if I hardly see the 10, because all my time, all my energy is taken up with the one. Every time everybody else sits down, he stands up. When it comes time for quiet reflection, he shouts loudly. When he's told to go outside to play games, he runs for it. I spend most of the week chasing him around this camp. I try and talk to him to explain to him that his behavior is not appropriate. He responds to my attempt to talk to him by placing his hands over his ears, looking at the ground and singing loudly. It was a test of character. And I'm trying to talk to him, I'm trying to get through to him, and indeed, my well-meaning, charismatic friends in the particular group are saying to me, we think he's got a demon. Now, I didn't want to buy into that, but I was beginning to suspect that they might be right. It was hard work. And I'm trying to get through, I'm trying to communicate, I'm trying to speak to him, but all I get is la, 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 la. Tricky. Halfway through the week, I'm really exhausted by this chap. Halfway through the week, I'm trying to talk to him, I'm trying to get through to him, when he puts his hands over his ears and he just keeps talking endlessly, almost like a stream of consciousness. I'm listening to all these words flying out, and in the midst of all these words, he says the word granddad. And something in my spirit says that's important, that's relevant, talk about that. So I very gently take his hands off his ears, and I say to him, tell me about granddad. This little 8-year-old boy lifts up his head. For the first time that week, he actually looked at me. And he said to me, my granddad is dead. I said, yeah, okay. Tell me what happened. And a little 8-year-old boy said, it happened about half a year ago. He said, and I went to the funeral and I saw my granddad in a big wooden box, and somebody put their hand on my shoulder and said to me, big boys don't cry. And this little boy said, I didn't cry because I'm a big boy. And half a year later, all that pent-up emotion has grown inside him to the point that this child is completely dysfunctional. Ladies and gentlemen, that is domination story. That says we even have to be in control of our own emotions. We have to keep everything in place, even our own feelings. And I said to a little 8-year-old boy, in the middle of this huge gathering of children, I said to him, you know something? The biggest person I know is called Jesus, and the smallest verse in the Bible says that he cried. And the kid lifted up his head and he said, really? And I said, and you need to know something. You need to understand that right now Jesus says you can cry. And he looked at me and said, is that really true? And I said, yeah, that's really true. And there and then it was as if a dam burst. There was an outpouring of emotion like I haven't seen before or since. He sobbed for an hour straight. Just sat on the floor, huge sobs, because that whole thing which says that big boys don't cry is a domination story, and it's horrible and it's ugly and it's nasty. And he cried and he cried and he cried. At the end of the meetings,